My husband of 34 years was sitting at the kitchen table doing the crossword puzzle when his phone buzzed. He didn't even glance up. Men like my husband never glance up. They've spent decades perfecting the art of seeming unbothered. I was standing at the counter refilling my coffee, so I saw the screen light up before he did. The name on the notification read Amber W. with a little pink heart emoji next to it. The message preview said, "Missing you already. Last night was everything." I set the coffee pot down very carefully. The way you set something down when your hands want to shake, but you won't let them. My husband, I'll call him by his name, Russell, still hadn't looked at the phone. He was working on a 7-letter word for betrayal. The irony of that would make me laugh later, much later, when I had the distance for it. In that moment, I just breathed. 62 years on this earth have taught me that the most dangerous thing a woman can do in a crisis is act before she thinks. I picked up his phone. He looked up then. I'm expecting a call from the contractor about they. Sit down, Russell. Something in my voice made him stop. I didn't recognize it myself at first. It wasn't anger. It was colder than anger. It was the voice of a woman who has already made up her mind and is simply waiting for the world to catch up. I read the message again. "Missing you already. Last night was everything." Sent at 7:14 in the morning while Russell had been telling me over scrambled eggs that he was proud of how well our retirement savings were holding up. I didn't cry. The tears would come later. Alone in the guest bathroom with the fan running. Not now. Not in front of him. I scrolled up. I wish I could say I only saw a few messages. One or two that were ambiguous, explainable. But there were months of them. Hotel confirmations, inside jokes I didn't understand. A photo she sent of herself in a red dress at some restaurant I'd never been to. Restaurant receipts forwarded to him. Him calling her sweetheart. Him telling her she made him feel young again. That last one landed like a stone in still water. 34 years. 2 daughters. A house we'd refinished together with our own hands. And what I gave him still wasn't enough because I couldn't make him feel young again. I put the phone face down on the counter. "Dorothy," he started. "Don't." I raised one hand. "Not yet." He was afraid of me in that moment. I could see it in the way his jaw tightened. Russell has never been afraid of much. He coached high school football for 20 years and built his contracting business from nothing. But he was afraid of me right then, and some small part of me took a quiet satisfaction in that. I went upstairs. I sat on the edge of our bed, on my side, the left side, the side I'd slept on for 34 years, and I looked at the wall for a long time. There was a framed photo above the dresser from our vow renewal on our 25th anniversary. Russell had cried during the ceremony, actually cried. I had thought it was the most romantic thing I'd ever seen. Amber W. I didn't know her last name yet, but I would. That afternoon, while Russell took a very long shower and then drove somewhere he didn't explain, I did what any woman my age who raised daughters in the internet era knows how to do. I looked her up. Amber Walsh, 38 years old, yoga instructor, posted pictures of sunsets and green smoothies and occasionally of herself at the kinds of restaurants where they write the specials on a chalkboard and the entrees cost $40. She looked exactly like what she was. Someone who had never had to fight for anything. Someone who saw something that belonged to someone else and just reached out and took it. I closed the laptop and called my daughter Naomi. Not to tell her, not yet, but just to hear her voice. She talked about my grandson's soccer game and a promotion she was hoping for at work, and I said, in the right places, and held the phone very tightly and thought, I will not let this man take one more thing from me. Not my composure, not my dignity, not my future. That night at dinner, I was perfectly pleasant. I made pot roast, his favorite, because I'd already planned it and I wasn't going to rearrange my life for him. He picked at it and said it was delicious and asked if I was feeling okay. Never better, I told him and smiled and meant neither. 3 days I lived like that. 3 days of watching him check his phone in the bathroom, of hearing him say he was going to meet a client when his calendar was clear, of smiling across the dinner table at a man I was quietly dismantling on the inside. 34 years of marriage means you know exactly where every load-bearing wall is. I knew which ones to take out first. On the fourth day, Amber Walsh made her first mistake. She texted Russell while he was in the garage. "When can I see you again? I've been thinking about you non-stop." And I, very calmly, very deliberately typed back from his phone, "Come to the house Saturday afternoon. She'll be at her sister's." The reply was almost instant, a string of heart emojis. "I can't wait. I'll bring that wine you liked." I took a screenshot and sent it to my own phone. Then I put his phone back exactly where I'd found it, propped against his old baseball cap on the workbench. My hands did not shake. I was 62 years old and I had survived things that would crack a lesser person, and I was not going to let my hands shake over this. I was not going to my sister's on Saturday. I spent that week in a kind of strange electric calm. I told no one what was coming. Not Naomi, not my sister Barbara, not my closest friend Eileen, who has known me since we were in our 20s and can read me like a billboard. I needed the element of surprise to remain intact, which meant keeping it inside myself like a held breath. I did make some preparations. I called our family attorney. Not a divorce lawyer yet, just our family attorney, a steady, practical woman named Janet who had helped us set up our trust and our wills. I asked a few quiet questions. She gave me a few quiet answers. I felt better having the shape of things in my mind. Saturday morning, I made myself a proper breakfast. Eggs, toast, fresh coffee. I sat at the kitchen table where Russell had been doing his crossword the morning I found out, and I ate slowly and I looked out at the backyard we planted together. The oak tree we put in for our 20th anniversary, now wide enough that you couldn't get your arms around it. Russell left at 11, supposedly to pick up some supplies at the hardware store. He didn't come back by noon, which told me what I needed to know about where he actually was. At 1:15, the doorbell rang. I had dressed that morning with care, not to impress anyone. That's not what the clothes were for. A navy wrap dress that Naomi had given me for my birthday last year, low heels, my good pearl earrings. The earrings Russell gave me for our 20th anniversary. I wore them on purpose. I opened the front door. Amber Walsh was younger in person than in her photos, and prettier too in the way that costs money and time to maintain. She was holding a bottle of wine in one hand and had the other lifted, already reaching forward to knock again, and when she saw me, her whole face went through about 6 different expressions in the space of 1 second. Surprise, confusion, recognition, terror. I had a brief, unkind pleasure watching the wine bottle tilt in her loosening grip. She opened her mouth. "Closed it," I said pleasantly. "You must be Amber." The color left her face completely. She looked at the wine bottle. She looked at me. She looked at the house number on the door as if she'd somehow come to the wrong address, and everything could still be a terrible misunderstanding. She started. I thought, Russell said. He said I'd be at my sister's, I finished for her. I know exactly what he said. I'm the one who sent that text. I stepped back from the door and gestured, the same way you gesture a guest into your home. "Please, come in." She didn't move. "You've come this far," I said, keeping my voice perfectly even. "You may as well see the whole picture." She stepped inside. I'll give her that. She didn't turn and run, though I could see she wanted to. I think some part of her recognized that running wasn't going to help anything now. I led her through the entryway into the living room. I'd straightened everything that morning out of pure habit, so it looked as it always does, comfortable and lived in. 34 years of accumulated life. The bookshelves Russell built by hand. The needlepoint my mother did that hangs above the fireplace. The family photos along the hallway she had to walk through, our daughters as toddlers, as teenagers in their wedding dresses, with their own children. Our entire life on display. I let her look at it all. I sat down in my chair, the blue wingback that is mine and has been mine since we moved in, and gestured to the sofa across from it. "Sit, please." She sat. She still had the wine bottle. She didn't seem to know what to do with it. I folded my hands in my lap and looked at her the way I used to look at my daughters when they'd done something they knew was wrong and were waiting to find out how much trouble they were in. It's a very particular look. It says, "I already know everything, and I'm giving you exactly one chance." "How long?" I asked. She swallowed. We didn't. "Amber." My voice was mild. "I read the messages. All of them. I know about the hotel in Asheville in March. I know about the restaurant on 5th where he told you he'd never felt this way before. I watched the blood drain further from her face with each item on the list. I know what he tells you about our marriage. I want you to understand that I know all of it, so that we don't have to spend time here with you trying to figure out what you can safely admit to." She was quiet for a moment, then in a very small voice, "How long have you known?" 10 days. I leaned back. "Now, can I get you something?" "I have coffee, water." I paused. "Sparkling or still?" She stared at me like I had grown a second head. Water's fine." I went to the kitchen and got her a glass of tap water in one of the everyday glasses, the kind we use for the grandchildren, plain clear glass, nothing special. For myself, I refilled my coffee in the ceramic mug Russell brought me back from a trip to Vermont the summer before last. Hand-thrown, glazed in deep blue, I set it on the side table next to my chair with a small, quiet deliberateness. She held her water glass with both hands. I said, "Tell me something, Amber. In all the conversations you've had with my husband, in all the months this has been going on, has he ever described our home to you, the house?" She looked around, confused by the question. "He mentioned it." "What did he say?" "He said it was fine, that it was, I don't know, just a house." "Just a house?" I let that settle. "My husband and I bought this house in 1993, I said. "We didn't have much. We had 2 little girls and a 30-year mortgage, and I painted every room myself while he was putting in 60-hour weeks building his business. That oak tree in the backyard," I gestured toward the window, "we planted it for our 20th anniversary. It's 22 inches in diameter now. I know because I measured it last week." I paused. "This is not just a house." She had the grace to look ashamed. It wasn't much, but it was something. I picked up my coffee and took a sip, taking my time. Outside, a car slowed at the end of the driveway, and we both heard it. Her body went rigid. I stayed perfectly still. Russell walked in through the garage, the door from the kitchen, the way he always comes in, and stopped dead in the doorway to the living room. His face when he saw us both? I'll carry that with me for a while. It was the face of a man watching something collapse that he'd spent a long time believing was stable. All those months of careful management, of excuses and compartments and careful lies, and here we both were, sitting 6 feet apart in his own living room. I said pleasantly, "There you are. I was about to come look for you." "Dorothy." He said my name the way a drowning man says the name of a life preserver. "Sit down, Russell." Same tone I'd used 10 days ago. Calm. Not a request. He sat in the chair across from Amber's end of the sofa and looked between us like a man watching an accident he caused, but cannot stop. Amber and I were just talking, I said. She brought wine. I nodded toward the bottle she'd set on the edge of the coffee table. Though I think I'll pass. You two can share it another time. Both of them flinched. I want to tell you something, I said, addressing them both with the same even tone. I want to say it once, clearly, so there's no misunderstanding later about what I knew or when I knew it or what I decided. I took out my phone. I pulled up the screenshots I'd saved, the message thread, the hotel confirmation I'd found forwarded to his email, the receipt I'd photographed from his desk. I set the phone on the coffee table between us, screen up. Neither of them moved toward it, but they both looked. That is 34 years of marriage, I said. That is my irrefutable documentation that it didn't mean to you what it meant to me. Russell's face had gone gray. I can explain. You cannot, I said. That's not a door I'm opening today. I turned to Amber. She was gripping the water glass very hard. I want you to look at those photographs on my hallway wall, I said. The ones you walked past on your way in. Do you know who the little girls in the pictures are? She shook her head slightly. Those are my daughters. They are grown women now with families of their own. They don't know any of this happened. And when they find out, and they will find out, because truth has a way of surfacing, it will break something in them that cannot fully be repaired. That is the thing I will never forgive. Amber's eyes had gone red. She was fighting it and losing. You're young, I said, not unkindly. And I am sure he told you things that made you feel like you were the answer to something. Men like my husband. Charming men. Men who know how to make a woman feel like she's the only one in the room. They are very good at making you feel chosen. What they don't tell you is how many other women felt exactly the same way. I paused. I felt the same way once. In 1986, he had a different name then, but it's the same quality of charm. Russell made a sound. I didn't look at him. Amber put the water glass on the table. Her hand was shaking. I didn't know, she started. I mean, I knew he was married, but he told me that you two that it was basically over, I suggested. Finished, just waiting on the paperwork? Yes, that is what they always say. I tilted my head slightly. Did it occur to you that if it were truly over, he might have come to you from his own address and not from mine? She didn't answer. She looked down at her lap. I'm not going to make a scene, I said. I'm not going to call anyone or post anything online. That's not who I am. I leaned forward slightly. But I want you to hear me say this directly to your face. This is my house. That man is my husband, for now at least, though I suspect that arrangement is coming to an end. And whoever told you that the wife would just accept this and go away quietly has badly miscalculated. I stood up. Amber looked up at me, startled. The door is behind you, I said. I think you know the way. She stood. She was taller than me by a few inches, but she felt smaller somehow in that room, in that moment. She picked up her purse, but left the wine. She walked to the door without a word, without looking at Russell, who sat perfectly still and watched her go. At the door she stopped. I was right behind her. Without turning round, very quietly she said, I'm sorry. I said nothing. I reached around her and opened the front door. She walked out. I watched her go to her car, a white Subaru I noted, and back out of my driveway. I watched until she turned the corner and the car disappeared. Then I closed the front door and stood in my own entryway for a moment, in the quiet. I went back to my blue wingback chair and sat down. Russell had not moved. He was still sitting in his chair across the room with the look of a man who has run out of options and knows it. Russell, I said, I want you to listen to me now because I am going to say this once. He nodded. His eyes were wet. I noted that and kept going. I have an appointment Monday morning with Janet. I'm having the house appraised and I'll need full disclosure on all accounts, personal, business, joint, within 2 weeks. The equity in this house and the retirement accounts we built together are marital assets, and I intend to make sure they're treated as such. I kept my voice even. I am not asking for a fight. But I am not asking for a fight. But I am not accepting nothing, and I am not going away. Dorothy, please, he leaned forward. Please. I don't want to lose you. I know what I did. I know it was wrong. Please just let me. Let you what? I asked. Explain? Apologize? Tell me it didn't mean anything? I shook my head slowly. Russell, we had a life here. We built something real. And you chose to treat it like it was disposable. You don't get to put that back together by saying sorry. He put his face in his hands. He was crying then properly, the way men cry when they finally understand they've lost something they cannot replace. Part of me, the part that spent 34 years loving him, that remembered who he was at 30 years old and who we were when we started, felt that grief. I'm not going to pretend I didn't. But I also remembered sitting on the edge of our bed looking at our vow renewal photo. I remembered that he had cried at the ceremony, and I thought, some people cry very easily over things they don't actually intend to honor. I got up, went to the kitchen, and poured the wine she'd brought down the drain. I rinsed the bottle and put it in the recycling bin. Then I washed my hands at the kitchen sink, looking out at the backyard, at that oak tree with its 22-inch trunk, all those years of weather and growth and staying put. I called Naomi that evening. I told her everything. She cried. She wanted to drive over immediately, and I told her no, not tonight. I was fine, and I meant it. Mom, she said, when she'd collected herself a little, what are you going to do? What I've always done, I told her. Handle it. I was at Janet's office at 9 on Monday morning. I had every document I needed in a folder I'd organized over the weekend. Account statements, the mortgage paperwork, the retirement account summaries, my own careful notes. Janet looked through everything with that unreadable face attorneys develop, and then she set it all down and looked at me over her glasses. You're very prepared, she said. I've had 10 days, I said. We spent 2 hours going through it. The picture that emerged was cleaner than I'd feared and messier than I'd hoped. As these things always are, I imagine. My name was on the accounts I'd known about. Some of the business accounts were more complicated. There were some questions about a business credit card I hadn't known existed. Janet made notes. I walked out of that office with a clear understanding of where I stood and what came next. I did not walk out with any illusions, but I hadn't had those since the moment I read Missing You already. Last night was everything. The divorce proceedings took 8 months. Russell hired an attorney who spent the first 2 months trying to minimize the marital estate. Janet spent those same 2 months methodically proving that he'd underreported it. The business credit card, it turned out, had been used for quite a few things beyond Amber. Not another woman, just his own comfort, which in some ways was worse. Self-indulgence doesn't even have the drama of passion as an excuse. In the end, we sold the house. I thought I would fight for it, but when it came to it, I didn't want to stay in it alone. Too many rooms built for a family. I took my share of the equity, which was considerable after 34 years of a paid-down mortgage, and the retirement accounts were divided appropriately, with Janet making sure appropriately meant what it was supposed to mean. Russell moved into an apartment in the development near his office. The last I heard, Amber Walsh had unfollowed him on social media before the ink was dry on our divorce papers. That piece of information came to me through my daughter Naomi, who had heard it through mutual acquaintances, and I'll admit I sat with it for a moment. Not with satisfaction, exactly. more with a tired recognition of how predictable certain things are. I bought a house on the other side of town. Smaller. I only need 3 bedrooms now, one for me and one each for visiting grandchildren, but it has a good yard and good light in the mornings and a kitchen with a window over the sink that looks out into the garden, which is where I intend to spend a great deal of time. The week I moved in, Naomi came and helped me unpack. My younger daughter Bess drove up with her husband and the kids, and we ordered pizza and let the grandchildren run through the empty rooms, and it was louder than it's been in my house in years. That evening, after the kids were asleep in their sleeping bags, I sat on the back porch with Naomi and Bess and a bottle of good wine, my choice this time, and we talked until nearly midnight. Bess said, "Are you actually okay, Mom? Not performing okay?" Actually okay. I thought about that, the way she asked it. She's always been the one who asks the real question. I am, I told her. And then, because it was true and I was tired of softening things, I think I was so busy being a wife for so long that I forgot to notice what I wanted for myself. I'm going to spend some time finding out. Naomi raised her glass. Bess raised hers. I raised mine. I am 62 years old. I have 2 daughters who call me every week and 4 grandchildren who draw pictures for me, and a friend in Eileen who drove over with soup and fury the day I finally told her what had happened. I have a new house with good morning light, and I have 34 years worth of evidence that I can build things that last. I have never been afraid of starting over. I learned a long time ago that starting over isn't failure. It's just what you do when you outgrow where you are. The wine was better than anything Russell would have chosen. I made a note to remember the label. I keep thinking about that oak tree in the backyard of my old house. 22 inches in diameter. I know because I measured it the week before everything fell apart, or maybe the week I finally let myself see that it already had. A tree doesn't grow that way by accident. It grows because something held, year after year, through drought and ice and every season that wanted to knock it sideways. I think about that tree a lot now. What Russell did was a choice, and every choice like that, made in secret, dressed up in excuses, sustained by lies told to 2 women at once, carries a weight that eventually has to land somewhere. It landed on him. Not because I was on some typad, because that is simply how things work. When you build your life on something hollow, the hollow part gives way. The bank statements don't lie. The messages don't disappear. The woman you underestimated has been paying attention longer than you know. I was 62 years old when I sat across from Amber Walsh in my own living room. And I want to be honest about what that took. Not just the composure in the moment, though that mattered, but the 10 days before it. The days of holding what I knew without letting it spill. Of gathering documents instead of throwing dishes. Of calling my attorney before I called anyone else. That kind of steadiness isn't something you're born with. It's something you build. Quietly over decades of showing up for your own life even when it's hard. I had built it without fully realizing I had. It was there when I needed it. There's something I want to say to anyone who finds themselves where I was, sitting with a truth they didn't ask for, trying to figure out what kind of person they're going to be in the middle of it. The answer is not to be the loudest person in the room. The answer is not to perform your pain for an audience or to match cruelty with cruelty. The answer, at least the one I found, is to get very clear, very fast, on what you actually value. Not what you've been told to value. Not what you've been told to value. Not what's easiest or most dramatic. What is actually true about who you are. I valued honesty. I valued the life I had built, even the parts of it that turned out to be built on sand. I valued my daughters and what they would see when they looked at how I handled this. Those things told me what to do every step of the way. How to sit in that room with Amber, how to speak to Russell, how to walk into Janet's office with a folder and a clear head instead of a shattered one. Amber was young and she made a choice she'll carry for a while. I don't say that with satisfaction. I say it because it's true and because I think most people already know, somewhere inside them, when they're doing something they won't be proud of. The knowing doesn't always stop the doing, but the consequences show up regardless. I am not the same woman I was before that Saturday. Some of what I lost I'll grieve for the rest of my life. Not Russell exactly, but the version of the future I thought I had. The assumption that what we'd build was permanent. Losing that kind of certainty is its own education. What it taught me is that the only thing I can actually count on is the person I choose to be when things go wrong. That person showed up for me. She was steadier than I expected. I think she'd been waiting a long time for me to need her. The new house has good morning light. I drink my coffee by the window and watch the garden come in, and I think, I built something real once, and I can build something real again. That is not a small thing to know about yourself at 62.